Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Scott Bevan, and on behalf of the Chairman of the Council of the Australian War Memorial, Mr Kerry Stokes, the Director, Mr Matt Anderson, Council members and staff, welcome and thank you for joining us this morning from across the nation for the 2021 Remembrance Day National Ceremony. This Remembrance Day ceremony is being held in the nation's capital on the traditional lands of the Ngunnawal peoples. The Australian War Memorial acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia. We recognise their continuing connection to land, sea and waters, and we pay our respects to elders past and present. We'd also like to acknowledge the dignitaries and members of the public attending here in Canberra today, and those watching the televised broadcast. Welcome to you all. We're joining you from the Captain Reg Saunders courtyard of the Australian War Memorial. The courtyard is located in the grounds of the memorial's sculpture garden, and it was named 6 years ago today in honour of Captain Reginald Walter Saunders, the first Aboriginal Australian to be commissioned as an officer in the Australian Army. To commence proceedings this morning, we await the arrival of the Governor-General of the Commonwealth of Australia, His Excellency General the Honourable David Hurley, and Her Excellency Mrs Linda Hurley. Their Excellencies will be received by the Chairman of the Council of the Australian War Memorial, Mr Kerry Stokes, and Ms Christine Simpson-Stokes. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand and make welcome the Governor-General of the Commonwealth of Australia, His Excellency General the Honourable David Hurley, and Her Excellency Mrs Linda Hurley. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. We're grateful to be able to gather here today for Australia's National Ceremony of Commemoration at the Australian War Memorial in front of the Stone of Remembrance, which has been temporarily relocated from the parade ground while the modernisation and expansion works of a number of the memorial's buildings and galleries are undertaken. A significant milestone in the memorial's built story also occurred 80 years ago today, with the inauguration and opening of the building by the then Governor-General, Lord Gowrie. In his opening remarks, Lord Gowrie said, "When we read the names inscribed on the walls of this memorial, let us ask ourselves, what can we do for those who did so much? What can we give to those who gave all?" His response was to ensure that their sacrifice was not in vain. And we do that through the act of remembrance, and we have done so every day since. Australia's Federation Guard is a ceremonial tri-service unit formed in preparation for the commemoration of the centenary of Federation. Since their inception, the Guard have provided a significant ceremonial presence to countless ceremonies, both at home and overseas. Ladies and gentlemen, a Catafalque party provided by Australia's Federation Guard will now take position at the Stone of Remembrance.
Come on, buddy, quick. Come on. Come on, buddy. Halt. Come on, party. Right. Turn. Catafalque party. Quick. March. Catafalque party, present! Arms! Catafalque party, reverse! Catafalque party, slow! Catafalque party. Halt! Catafalque party outwards. Turn. Catafalque party rest on. Party left, turn. Come on, party, quick, march.
From in front of the Stone of Remembrance, playing the didgeridoo, was leading aircraftman Taran Roach. Leading aircraftman Roach is a proud Warramai man, serving with 26th Squadron from RAAF Base Williamtown, near Newcastle in New South Wales. Please thank him for joining us here today. This Remembrance Day marks the 103rd anniversary of the Armistice, which ended the First World War of 1914 to 1918. It was the largest and most costly conflict the world had known. The Great War involved the mobilisation of 70 million personnel in uniform worldwide. They fought in a global conflict that drew in more than 100 countries, caused the disintegration of old empires, and reshaped the political order for much of the 20th century. It left between 9 million and 16 million people dead. More than 1/3 of all the soldiers killed were missing or had no known graves. Many millions more were maimed physically or damaged mentally, adding to the enormous cost to all nations involved. Well, more than a century has passed since the end of the Great War, and alongside our friends and allies, our servicemen and women have continued to serve selflessly in places near and far, on battlefields in many lands, on or under the oceans and seas, and in the skies. We acknowledge all these men and women, and also those who will follow in their footsteps. Importantly, we also remember and we acknowledge those who have returned and been left with mental suffering from wounds and injuries sustained in service, from exposure to trauma, danger, or life-threatening conditions. This burden is heavy, and for some, it has proven too much. Today, we remember and we consider what has been lost to us, but also what has been gained. It is an opportunity to reflect on the values we live by and to recommit ourselves to peace. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand as Mr. John King, representing the National President of the Returned and Services League of Australia, recites the ode. After the ode, the last post will be sounded, followed by a minute's silence and the rouse.
Catafalque party, I turn. Jump.
They went with songs to the battle. They were young, straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end, against odds unaccounted. They fell with their faces to the foe. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
Catafalque party, present. Arms. Catafalque Party shoulder. Arms.
Lest we forget.
Catafalque Party order. Arms.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. This morning's commemorative address will be delivered by Mr. Matt Anderson, Director of the Australian War Memorial. Matt has a history of public service, notably as our ambassador to Afghanistan in 2015 and 2016, High Commissioner to Solomon Islands from 2011 through to 2013, and High Commissioner to Samoa from 2007 to 2011. Matt also served as Chief Negotiator of the Peace Monitoring Group in Bougainville in 2001 and 2002. His diplomatic career followed service in the Australian Army. Matt was appointed as Director of the Australian War Memorial in April of 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Matt Anderson.
Your Excellencies, veterans, widows, families, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. In 1993, on the 75th anniversary of the armistice, then Prime Minister Keating delivered the eulogy for the unknown Australian soldier. In interring a soldier from the Great War, the so-called war to end all wars, but which we now know sowed the seeds of a second, even more terrible war, Paul Keating said, "We might think this Australian soldier died in vain, but in honouring our war dead, as we always have, and as we do today, we declare that this is not true." Today, 28 years on, we declare still that this is not true. And as we say every evening at the last post ceremony, we also honour all those who have served, those still serving, and the families that love and support them. We do not gather today to glorify war. Indeed, at our opening 80 years ago today, the then Governor-General, Lord Gowrie VC, said that when people leave this place, they must utter, "Never again, never again." I have never sacrificed anything for the freedoms that I enjoy. They were won by others, and on this day and at this hour, they continue to be guaranteed by others, by the men and the women of the Australian Defence Force. What I can do, and what I ask each of you to do, is to honour the 2 million women and men who have worn this nation's uniform, and the 102,800 recorded on the Roll of Honour here at the Australian War Memorial, such that their service and their sacrifice is not in vain. The philosopher Arthur Danto wrote that we erect monuments so that we shall remember, and we build memorials so that we shall never forget. Private Edward Rose served with the 12th Battalion, but he never made it to the front line. From Baghdad in Tasmania, he was known as Bob, and with his mother's permission, he enlisted while still only 15 years of age. Bob's mother had written to General Birdwood, requesting that her son be kept safe. On reaching England with the 1st Training Battalion in April 1918, Bob caught measles, bronchitis and oedema of the lungs, and he died at Sutton Veny Military Hospital on the 1st of June 1918. The only letter she received from General Birdwood was notification of his death. One of those who made it to the war and who fought on the Somme and at Passchendaele was Private Richard Williams of the 54th 1st Battalion from Kapunda in South Australia. Having been diagnosed with shell shock and trench foot, he was on his way home when, off the coast of Fremantle, on the morning of the armistice, he jumped overboard and his body was never recovered. In honouring our war dead, as we always have, and as we do today, we declare their service was not in vain. During the desperate fighting at Ishirava on the Dakota track, Corporal John Metzen of the 2nd 14th Battalion had his ankle smashed by a bullet. Refusing to be evacuated on a stretcher, he instead padded his hands and knees in order to crawl behind the stretcher carriers. He crawled for 3 weeks with a party that was then cut off from the main track. And despite his courage and his tenacity, Metzen was eventually discovered by the Japanese and he was executed on the 4th of October 1942. We declare today that he did not die in vain. Following the fall of Kabul in August, much has been said about Afghanistan and the merits of our longest war. Some have even suggested that the 43 lives recorded on the Afghanistan panel of the Roll of Honour here at the Australian War Memorial must therefore have been in vain. You can learn a lot about a country by understanding what it's prepared to fight for. You can learn even more by what its sons and daughters are prepared to die for. They were sent in the early days to kill or to capture the mastermind of the 9/11 attacks, which claimed thousands of innocents, including 10 Australians. They stayed as ordered. They redeployed as ordered to counter the continued threat of terrorism and, over time, to mentor and to reconstruct. At a ceremony here to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the departure of Mentoring Task Force 1, I was asked by one of the young veterans, was it worth it? Former naval officer and Anglican Bishop of the Australian Defence Force, Tom Frame, said that asking what's it for is not a sign of mental illness, but of human maturity. To find that the answers do not all come at once or in an instant does not signal that someone cannot cope with life, but rather it's an affirmation that life is complex, insight is rare, and wisdom is precious. My response that day to the young man with old eyes was that he and multiple Australian contingents had left behind an enviable reputation. Our enemies feared them, our allies revered them, and those Afghans that we worked with most closely in Uruzgan and in Kandahar asked for the Australians to return. Albert Einstein once said, "Not everything that counts can be counted." In southern Afghanistan, Australian forces fought some of their fiercest battles since the Vietnam War. Many, but not all of those actions were fought by Australian Special Forces. The Special Forces Special Air Service Regiment Sergeant S, who reflected on the 2010 Battle of Tizak in Afghanistan, said, "To fail would be worse than death. To let your mates down in combat would be worse than death. Yep, that's the essence. You never let your mates down." Corporal Cameron Baird of the 2nd Commando Regiment was killed in the final moments of an assault on the Taliban stronghold in the village of Gorchak in Uruzgan in July 2013. For most conspicuous acts of valour, extreme devotion to duty and ultimate sacrifice, he was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross for Australia, one of 4 so awarded to Australians during the war in Afghanistan. Just 3 weeks before his death, Bird responded to an Australian high school student who had written to him as part of a school pen pal project. Baird's response in part reads, "My name is Cameron and I'm 32 years old. Sometimes my job is difficult, but I have good reasons to do it. Making the world a safer place for others is one reason. I think we're very lucky in Australia. We are safe and we can live our lives as we wish." In your letter you ask some questions. I'm a team commander in an assault platoon. We do many different missions in Afghanistan, but the main focus is providing security to the community and advising the Afghan police and army. I've been to Afghanistan a number of times, and they are getting better and better each time I come back. Have I always wanted to be in the army? Simple answer is no. When I was 12 years old, I wanted to be a footballer and a sportsman, but I wasn't good enough to be a professional. Since joining, I've been really happy with it. I've travelled a lot around Australia training and around the world on operations, and I have heaps of good mates that I work with. Thank you so much for writing. Always try your best in whatever you do and always be happy in your life. Enjoy and have fun. Regards, Cameron. Not everything that counts can be counted. Chaplain Rob Sutherland ministered to our service personnel in Tarankout, in Kandahar and in Kabul. After 3 tours of duty, Chaplain Sutherland concluded that victory or success in Afghanistan is not going to be measured in the way it might have been measured in the past. I think some of our best successes are actually going to be in the people we bring home and hopefully the pride they will have in the job they have done. Today, we remember those who have served, suffered and died in all wars and operations, and those left behind. It was not in vain if we remember. It was not in vain because we remember. It was not in vain since putting service before self never is. As the blast wall in Tarankout once read, all gave some and some gave all. It was duty nobly done. Today, we remember, lest we forget.
Director, thank you for those insights, for your words, and for your service to our nation. Traditionally on Remembrance Day, wreaths are laid by representatives of the embassies and high commissions of more than 100 countries located here in Canberra. Well, as that could not occur this year due to capacity limitations, members of the diplomatic community were welcomed to the Australian War Memorial yesterday, where they laid the wreaths that you can see on behalf of the citizens of their countries and in recognition of the breadth of international involvement in this day. This gesture symbolises a unified desire for peace and the respect shared by all nations for the memory of those who were lost during the war and other operations. We commence today's wreath laying with the Governor-General of the Commonwealth of Australia, His Excellency General the Honourable David Hurley, and Her Excellency Mrs. Linda Hurley. Representing the Prime Minister of Australia, the Honourable Andrew Gee. Representing the Chief Minister of the Australian Capital Territory, Ms Emma Davidson. Representing the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mr Lou O'Brien. Representing the President of the Senate, Senator Holly Hughes. Representing the Chief Justice of the High Court of Australia, the Honourable Justice Stephen Gageler. The Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, His Excellency, Mr Miguel Palomino de la Gala, on behalf of the diplomatic community here in Canberra. Representing the Leader of the Federal Opposition, Senator Katie Gallagher. Chief of the Defence Force, General Angus Campbell. On behalf of the Chairman of the Council of the Australian War Memorial, Ms Rhonda Van Zeller. Representing the National President of the Returned and Services League of Australia, Mr. John King. National President of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Veterans and Services Association, Squadron Leader Gary Oakley. And accompanying the National President is today's didgeridoo player, leading aircraftman Taryn Roach. National President of the Naval Association of Australia, Mr. David Manolis. Representing the National President of the Air Force Association, Air Commodore Peter McDermott. Representing the National President of the Australian War Widows Incorporated, Dr. Catherine Sperling. National President of the Australian Federation of Totally and Permanently Incapacitated Ex-Servicemen and Women, Ms. Pat McKay. And the final wreaths will be laid by the Chairman of Legacy Australia, Legatee Richard Cranner, accompanied by Legacy Youth Representative Ms. Kate McInnes. Poetry across the century has been a way for men and women in uniform to contemplate and express their experiences and emotions. Emotions of innocence and guilt, of hopelessness and devastation, of compassion and tragedy, of life and of death. In December of 1915, John McCrae's moving work in Flanders Fields was first published. It would soon come to embody those feelings of loss and remembrance that resonated from the First World War. These words are also inscribed in the Portland stone of the Flanders Fields Memorial Garden at the centre of our commemoration today, here at the Australian War Memorial. Well, today we're honoured to present a musical rendition of this classic work, led by Sergeant Deborah O'Toole and accompanied by the band of the Royal Military College Duntroon.
In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly. Scarce heard amid the guns below, we are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields, in Flanders fields, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up your quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw, the torch be yours to hold it high, if ye break faith with us who die. We shall not sleep, the poppies grow in Flanders fields, in Flanders fields. We shall not sleep, the poppies grow in Flanders fields, in Flanders fields.
Thank you, Sergeant O'Toole, for that beautiful and moving performance. In 1918, on the Western Front, the guns finally fell silent with the armistice on the 11th of November. Australian official war correspondent, historian, and the memorial's founder, Charles Bean, chose not to celebrate. Instead, he drove to Fromelles, where he had witnessed Australia's worst day ever in war back in July 1916, with 5,533 Australian casualties and 1,917 dead. In silence, he walked the battlefield to reflect and be with the men who had dreamt of this day, which they would never see, but for which they had given their lives. We found the old no man's land simply full of our dead, he wrote. The skulls and bones and torn uniforms were lying about everywhere. Bean later wrote, "It is over. The enormous effort of the men, yes, and the women and the children, is finished. Australia will settle down to carve out her new and splendid future. We are free to be happy again." Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the national anthem.
Catafalque Party, shoulder, arms. Catafalque Party, present, arms.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is girt by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Catafalque Party, shoulder, arms.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing as the Governor-General of the Commonwealth of Australia, His Excellency General the Honourable David Hurley, and Her Excellency Mrs Linda Hurley, escorted by the Memorial's Chairman, Mr Kerry Stokes and Ms Christine Simpson-Stokes, depart the ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. The Catafalque Party, provided by Australia's Federation Guard, will now depart the ceremony.
Catafalque Party in words, turn. Catafalque Party, quick, march. Come on, buddy. Quick, march.
Please join me in thanking the members for their support of today's ceremony. And once again, the memorial would like to thank today's didgeridoo player, leading aircraftman Taryn Roach. Vocalist Sergeant Deborah O'Toole. Bugler, musician Aaron Passfield. And the members of the band of the Royal Military College Duntroon, led by music director Captain Shane Gillard, for their wonderful musical accompaniment throughout today's proceedings. Ladies and gentlemen, and to all those watching from across Australia and overseas. That concludes the Remembrance Day National Ceremony for 2021. The Australian War Memorial will reopen to the public next Wednesday, the 17th of November, so just 6 days' time. We look forward to welcoming all of you back, and we encourage you to book your free tickets for visitor sessions on our website. We would like to thank you all for joining us, and we ask that all guests who please maintain their social distancing and follow the directions of staff as you depart. To each and every one of you, we wish you a very pleasant afternoon.